Good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome to this webinar about working and living in London. My name is Maria Johansson, and I'm one of the alumni relations managers here at Lund University. And tonight, I have with me my colleague, Karen.
Hello, my name is Karen Paulson, and I work together with Maria with alumni relations here at Lund University.
And Karen's going to be our master of the Q&A. So she will be hosting that part of the session. I'm very excited for tonight's webinar. This is the first webinar of this global career talk series we do this year, I think. We've done several before. We digitally visited Singapore, Amsterdam, New York, for example, and you can all find those on our YouTube playlist on the Lund University channel. We are soon going to let our panel join us. First, I'm just going to share some housekeeping rules for tonight's webinar. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. Usually you find that at the bottom of your Zoom window. Karen will be sharing any links that are relevant for our talk in the chat. And this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available through YouTube for, it says 2 weeks. We haven't really decided on the exact time, but at least 2 weeks. So you will be able to see it again. And you will receive the link by email from us, including also our survey. So if you have any ideas about future alumni events that you would like to join or any other feedback you would like to give us, please share that in your survey as well. And we in the Alumni Relations and Employability team, we have a few other events coming up these next few months. We have some events in English and some events in Swedish. So if you're a Swedish speaker interested in working at Salm, there is a session on October 19th. Actually Thursday, right? Coming up then, the World Bank Group is visiting Lund University on Friday, and you're very welcome to join that as well. Karen will share the links in the chat during our session. Then if you're a Swedish speaker and you're interested in working in the EU, there is an event on October 25th. And then if you're an international graduate student interested in staying in Sweden after your studies and working, we have a webinar coming up on working in Sweden as an international graduate. Some useful tips, the Career Hub, that's the platform for Lund University students when it comes to job ads, events, and guides related to your career. In Career Hub, you find also Going Global. That's a platform where you find guides for working in many different countries. So if you're interested in, for example, working in the UK and in London, you would find a guide in Going Global. And if you're an alum, I know that we have quite a few alum joining us this afternoon. You can find that by going into your alumni page and updating or reviewing your details. And on the confirmation page, you find a link to where you can find the Going Global platform. Join the career newsletters, and also if you are at the end of your studies, don't forget to join the alumni network. That's open for, of course, everyone. So even if you're staying for just a semester, 2 semesters as an exchange student or doing your full master's degree, you're equally welcome to join.
Most of you are already alumni. Update your profile if you haven't recently.
Yes, yeah, exactly. To get for nothing else, but for also getting access to the Going Global portal and other benefits as an alum. Yes, I think we'll jump back into screen and say hello to our panel. Welcome, Sveta, Will, and Victoria. See if you can jump into view.
I don't think my camera is on.
Hello. Yeah, hello, hi everyone. I think we have the same issue with the camera now, Maria.
Okay,
let's co-host again.
And we'll fix it so we'll see your lovely faces as well. I'm just gonna make you access your cameras, and then we will do a short introduction for each and every one of you. There we go. And I know that Will, you're staying without video tonight as well.
Yeah, that's right, Maria. Sorry, everyone. I'm rather ill, as you can probably hear.
Oh, not too bad.
Not too bad. There we go. Okay, great. So we have a gallery view, finally. A warm welcome to everyone. Let's start with a quick introduction. Let's start with you, Sveta. You've been working in London for quite a while, but you're not in London at the moment, I've noticed.
Oh, hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Sveta. I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight. Yeah, as it happens, you know, the nature of being and not being in London, you never quite know where you are. I'm actually away at the moment, traveling for a bit. So different time zone as always, making this a lot of fun. But by way of introduction, as Maria just said, I've actually been in London for over 9 years. So I graduated in 2014 from Lund University, and I moved straight after, literally the week after I finished my dissertation. That's when I moved to London. And so I've been there over 9 years. I've worked different jobs in kind of different sectors, different roles. So I've moved around quite a lot. I did a recap recently. It was 6 different roles and 4 different employers, 3 different sectors. That's kind of the span. Essentially, my specialty is building and commercializing alumni networks, which might be funny to hear in this context, but that's what I've done for the last many years, especially, and not just in higher education, but also in a kind of professional services sector. So my recent role was with the global law firm Clifford Chance. So I worked there for 2 years, and before that I was at EY, also managing alumni programs there, and before that at LSE, just to name a few, but I'll stop there before I take over this whole thing. I'm excited to hear from the other panelists as well.
Warm welcome to you, Sveta. Victoria, you are currently in London, right?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here and to meet you all, at least online, if anything else. So yes, I am currently in London. I actually, similarly to Sveta, I graduated from Lund in 2014 and moved straight after to London as well. Then I was there for a few years, and then I moved with a company I was at the time with to Stockholm. So I've done both cities. I did Stockholm for a few years, and then I came back to London. But yeah, so a little bit about my background. Graduated from Lund 2014. I studied business and economics, and I did the master's in international marketing and brand management. So I've been going the marketing comms route. So I came to London, and then I've had a few different roles within marketing, media, tech, and I'm now currently within the tech industry. I work for a tech company called Minutes, which is actually Swedish. So I'm still kind of having one foot in both ponds, so to say. And my role there is head of communications. And just very quickly, we do sensor-based tech solutions, both hardware and software for property managers and owners. So yeah, a little bit, I've had a various of different roles, but it's been mostly within marketing and tech throughout the years.
Great, welcome so much, Victoria. And
Thank
Will,
you.
a little bit about you and your background.
Yep, thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone. So I'm Will, originally, well, I still am English, and I was a diplomat when I started when I was quite young, actually, out of school in 2006 for 8 years until 2014 when I moved to Stockholm. Worked in various roles in Stockholm, and you know, really enjoyed the kind of different culture that was before moving to Lund in 2016 and studying my master's in international economics. From there, I moved back to London and lived in London until last year when I moved out to the Cotswolds, and I now live in a 400-year-old thatched cottage, so it's all very British up here. But it is quite a long commute every day, but it's still, yeah, very different life to in London. And now I'm working. I was in the Ministry of Defence until around 6 months ago, and now I work for a tech company as business operations manager, and also the CEO of the company I met racing, and I also race for McLaren. So it's a very big change from a few years ago.
So happy that you could join us as well. Well, thank you. I think we're gonna go chronologically a bit on the career journeys. I think many of our students and alumni listening are curious about both how you found your jobs. I think some of you touched upon it, but I think we'll dive a little bit deeper on it. And then the working life experience in London, as well as accommodation. If you're not living in a 400-year cottage, where could you live, for example? And also a bit of your cultural differences you have experienced. But Victoria, you mentioned you worked at Minute in Stockholm as well. But did you, if you want to share some of your insights on, because I guess you didn't search for the job, you were relocated to London, or did you search for the job in London?
So actually, it was the other way around. I was in London, where I came after graduating from Lund. And then if I'm just going to touch upon like how I applied for the jobs there, it was very like standard route. I searched online, I looked up companies that I was interested in. I applied to different roles there. And that's how I found my first job. And then I moved on to a media communications agency that was based in London. And then after a few years there, I got an opportunity to move with them to Stockholm. So that's how I ended up in Stockholm for a few years. But then I wanted to go back to London. So that's actually how I found the job at Minute, where I'm currently working and have been doing so now for almost 5 years. And that was at the time they were expanding into the UK market, and we now have commercial office in London. So it was a little bit of luck, I would say, that at the time when I was looking to come back to London and I was looking for a job, and then I found the company Minute. So I heard about them, I wrote to them, and it was just a good time to join them because they were just opening up their commercial office in London, and that's how I came back to London. So I've done a little bit like going over to London, then going to Stockholm, and then coming back. So yes.
Great. And Sveta, you've been trying quite a few different positions, work positions in London. Can you share any of your like job searching strategies when finding another employer and things like that?
Absolutely. It's actually quite interesting. I was reflecting on that today, kind of that journey almost a decade ago. So when I first decided that I'm moving to London, I was still working on my dissertation. So I think it was April 2014, just finalizing that. And one day I decided I'm moving to London. So I started, doing the usual kind of job search, looking at the organizations, finding the different ads, getting my CV ready for that. It was very clear. So having the direction was really clear, and also being very clear on the sector. So I wanted to work in higher education. That was clear to me. And I decided that's the best place for me to do that, to pursue that, to have a lot of different options and opportunities. The challenge that I found at a time, and would not necessarily apply now, is that at the time, what I could do while not being in London was find roles, apply, hope for an interview. And I actually remembered having a few online interviews in a study room at the university, which is quite funny now to remember. But the issue with that was that at the time, online interviews weren't really a thing. So they were only maybe kind of the first screening point or stage in any interviewing selection process. So I remember actually being kind of disregarded for roles because I was not physically in London yet. So I didn't have a phone number, I didn't have anything. I just knew I have a date. I picked the date, I'm gonna fly, but I was not physically there. So there were roles that were kind of live, advertised, that I couldn't kind of progress to because I wasn't there yet, but I was trying to get ahead. This would not happen today because, you know, in the kind of post-pandemic world, not only is it kind of online first, but actually I'm pretty sure you can do a whole kind of interview selection process without you know, even having any physical kind of connection with the place and the office. In my previous role, I started interviewing, it was 2021, I started interviewing May 2021. So, and I started the role in August, and I did not go to the office until I believe like end of September. So my whole interaction with the place was through a laptop, and that was quite an interesting experience. So I'd say first is that you have an advantage if you want to move to London, that you don't have this issue with the location. So you can kind of start early and really actually secure a role before you move. I didn't have that. I just kind of had to hit the ground running once I was there. And over the years, again, because things have changed so much with COVID, the kind of advice would be different, and the role transition was very different. For example, when I was in between roles, say 6 years ago, 7 years ago, even 4 years ago, it was very difficult if I'd gotten an interview to kind of even organize myself with going and, you know, attending an interview, because I had to like take time off my day, working day. Whereas, you know, if you do it now, you can literally do it over your lunch and be so much easier to just find that. But not just that, it's actually much easier to get an informal conversation with someone, to network, to even find out about a role and kind of progress. So I think a really big advantage is that there's more flexibility, and the opportunity for anyone interested is that much more, that you can, one, reach out to the companies and the contacts that you're interested in, and then apply and kind of have more chance to go through the process, and then really learn more. You don't have to be physically, location isn't really an issue for you. That was definitely an issue, you know, even a few years ago, kind of pre-pandemic, and even throughout. And so that kind of gets me to another point, which is about the network, and, you know, starting to leverage that. Even, you know, if you're a student or a recent graduate, really look into the connections you might have through the alumni network or with the university, or just wider professional networks that you have from, you know, a recent role you had, or even volunteering, because that's also, you know, you'd be surprised who's connected to whom and can make an introduction for you. And an introduction, you know, can be just the starting point for you to learn more about an organization, but then it can actually be a much bigger kind of support for you to advise you and to mentor, or actually help you, you know, get a role somewhere where you might not otherwise hear even about it. I think there are a few things that I would highlight.
So something it's easier to go through the starting of an application process than something good that came out of the pandemic, maybe. And Will, I have a question for you, because you mentioned that you recently moved from the public sector and then into the private market. What was your strategy for finding a new work area, or another industry than the one you've been working for before?
So I think, as Sveta mentioned, network is absolutely key. And a bit of a funny story, actually. So late last year, I was racing and crashed into the CEO and did him around £20,000 of damage. We met up a few weeks later for a drink, and he actually hired me. So it just demonstrates that, you know, networking is all important. And I think definitely, you know, understanding a sector or having an in is just vital, really. I think, you know, what now with electronic recruitment, unless you've got the keywords and you've got experience, you kind of automatically sifted. So I think, you know, maximizing things like the Lund Alumni Network, or meeting people and speak to them about the sector you want to be in and understanding where it's going, and even getting experience if you can is really key. And that's something I kind of didn't realize was so effective until my experience recently.
Yeah, but so I guess you're working your debt off still. With
Unfortunately, he didn't take it out of my pay, but the first month's
well,
check,
that's
I was wondering.
That sounds good. So before moving on to another area in this talk, what kind of do you have any recommendations of resources or support systems that would someone start looking for a job in London would benefit from using? Victoria, for example, do you have an idea or recommendation?
Yeah, so I just like to also back what Sveta and Will mentioned. I think one of the most important things to do, both if you want to go to London, but also when you're actually there, is to network and just kind of, use the alumni network, try to meet people, introduce yourself, if you're open for a new job or what you're looking for. I think obviously the beauty of London is that there's a lot of people have moved to London for work, and so a lot of people are also very open to meeting others and supporting each other. So I think networking is one of the most important things one can do when in London. It's definitely how I built my both my close community of friends, but also like professional network for sure. In terms of like a specific resource, I'd say one that I've actually had a lot of use of, where I got involved very early on in my when I moved to London, is the Swedish Chamber of Commerce for the UK. So the Swedish Commerce, they operate around the world. I think the UK branch is one of the biggest ones, if I'm not remembering wrong here, but I think it's one of the biggest active chambers of commerce, and they organize everything from events, presentations. There's definitely a lot of room for networking. And when I moved to London, I believe this is still active. They used to have what was called a young professionals network, where a lot of people who were new to London, maybe just coming out of university and who had moved to London, they would join this network, and then you would meet a lot of other people who are in the same boat as you. So I'd say that's a great resource. I've had a lot of benefit from joining it early on during my London days, and I met both close friends now, but also great professional connections from there. So that's definitely something I would recommend. You'll find it if you search for like Swedish Chamber of Commerce for the UK, and then there's lots of info on their site.
One tip that I'd like to give, and actually with a personal anecdote and story, even if it may not be the most kind of usual, and actually to kind of build on what Victoria is saying and what Will is saying, with the alumni network and just broader your networks, think of your networks. It's really important that you tell people that you're looking for a role or an opportunity and what exactly you're looking for, so they're aware of it. So for example, when I was still at EY, my colleagues that I was getting along well with, they knew that I was looking for new opportunities, that I was interested in doing something else. And the way that my just immediately recent role came about at Clifford Chance, I'd never heard of it. I'd never even heard of the firm. It's a big global firm. I had never heard of it. I had no kind of crossover with the legal sector. I never would have thought I'd work there. But several people at EY told me about this role, saying, oh, someone we know there, told us about this role. He was actually another EY alumni who had worked years ago at EY, and everyone is in contact with everyone. So that's how the role even kind of came on my radar. And it was a very straightforward process for me to actually say, oh, okay, this looks interesting. Please introduce me, to them. I'll talk to this person, see how I feel. And eventually, I liked what I heard. The role was interesting, and I got a referral for the role. that meant that I kind of skipped the application process and I went straight for interviews, because there is that big kind of emphasis on, oh, someone's endorsed you and we already work with them. And so we trust their judgment in that sense, even just getting that introduction. So, you know, I ended up taking this role and, you know, having a great opportunity that seemed like it was created for me, but I wouldn't have known if I wasn't talking to people, I wasn't telling them that I want to do something. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm good at, you know, and have that kind of relationship, which you have to nurture that with, you know, your colleagues, your peers, people that you know, and having that kind of knowledge. But another tip that I would give connected to that is that many big global organizations, such as, you know, EY, for example, where I worked before, they actually encourage and reward their employees for referring successful candidates. So it's not just a kind of a one-off game. What you want to do is, if you're good somewhere, you know, find a good fit for a place, find someone that can make that introduction. It's actually advantageous for them financially. If you're successful in that role, they'll get a bonus. And that is not, you know, not a small, it's actually a smart thing to do. And it's a win-win for you and for them. Don't expect that someone will just, you know, endorse you kind of blindly because they kind of put their reputation on the line, but it's a really important kind of tool to use, an important asset. So think about it. There's something in it for them. There's something in it for you, and actually for the organization, because if you're successful, then you're a great asset to them and everyone kind of wins from it. So that's a really important tip for everyone to consider, and just kind of keep in mind, not just in your first job, but kind of subsequently.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very good advice. I actually haven't heard about that kind
all
of
the insights, Maria, all the inside knowledge.
Well, that's good. Thank you so much for that advice. I think we're gonna look a bit on the quality of life and work-life balance and those things. London is a huge city, of course, so it might vary a lot. But hear a bit about your experiences from that. How would you describe the overall quality of life when working in London? I know that all of you have experience from working in other countries and cities as well. So let's start with you, Will. What would you say? How would you describe the quality of life and also maybe work-life balance while working in London?
Yeah, so I don't want to put everyone off too much, but in all honesty, Stockholm, I found it, you know, a lot easier to live a nice life and have a nicer quality apartment.
Tell them the truth, Will. Tell them the truth.
Yeah. It's, you know, living in London is quite difficult and quite expensive. The commute is quite long. The flats, you know, it's hit and miss in terms of quality. So I think I completely agree with what Sveta and Victoria said just now. And I think also, you know, a key part of living a nice life and having a good quality of life is networking and finding places to live as well. I think, you know, if you can live in a nice place and share with some friends, it's going to be a lot better than if you're going to an estate agent and renting or trying to find someone you don't know to live together. And yeah, like I'm fortunate now to move away. But then, you know, the other side of it is, no matter kind of, so before I lived in Angel in Islington, and it's not that far from Westminster where I worked, but it was about 50 minutes on the tube. So quite often the commute is quite long to your place of work unless you consciously choose to live nearby. So in terms of work-life balance, I really see London moving more towards the kind of Swedish model, in that employers are more keen for flexibility, for rewarding regularly, having, you know, things like fika breaks. Obviously it's not called fika, but there are those nice things that employers are giving, I think, because now that we're facing a squeeze on pay, they're keen to attract and retain talent with other incentives. And I think, yeah, it's really nice to see London moving and British companies moving more towards a Swedish way of doing things. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear what the other panelists think about that, but that's just how it kind of seems to me.
Yeah, thank you. Victoria, what's your ideas about the
Yeah. again, similar to what Will just said, and I don't want to break anyone's dreams here, but I would have to agree 100% with everything what Will just said. Then I would also just like to add, I think, like quality of life obviously is very subjective, and if I just look at myself, and when I moved to London, I was 24 years old, and I was taking part of everything one could say that London has to offer in terms of, culture, music, art. Like, you can find anything that you're interested in, and obviously that gives you a lot of life quality and value, of course, if you can take part of all of this. So that's been amazing, 100%. But just like Will said, in terms of obviously the housing, rents are extreme. I'd say in London they're very, very high for the quality that you get, because it is definitely hit and miss. I've moved houses, I think 8 times or something in the past few years. So, you find a place and then maybe you love that one, but then, the landlord, he decides to sell the place or just for some other reason, then you have to start over and find something new. And yeah, it can be stressful for sure. It can. But yeah, moving in with maybe friends, that's obviously great. If you can do that, I think at least like at the beginning, one would almost have to be open to sharing with others. So do like a flat share situation, just because rents are so high. Unless obviously you would rather live a bit further outside of London, then it's a bit more possible to find something like a studio apartment or something where you can live by yourself. So yeah, that's obviously something to consider, but also more kind of in the workplace. I would also like to add to what Will was saying. I think employers are definitely trying to do a lot more of these kind of employer branding, getting those fika moments together. There's a lot of social activities, a lot of hangouts at the pub. The pub has been a very central role in during my years in London. Like, it's a lot of afterworks with the team that's being done at the local pub, which I think is really nice, and it's definitely something that adds value and that adds culture to your workplace. So obviously, to just sum this up, like, I think it depends on what you value and what you want from life. I've never regretted moving to London, and especially not during like the first few years of my career. It's been amazing, but obviously it is something to consider. Definitely the housing situation, for sure, and the commute. Sorry, I forgot about the commute, but yeah, just like Will was saying, one has to be open to commuting, because even if you live, like I live fairly centrally in Bermondsey, and if I want to get to work, which is actually just a couple of stops, but just because I have to switch tubes or trains, it takes me roughly like 45 minutes as well, and then I still live pretty centrally. So it is something that one just has to accept.
A good book and a good podcast maybe helps that.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
And we've been touching on accommodation and places to live. Sveta, do you have any like recommendations or special housing areas in London that you would recommend that are nice to move into, easy to find, like a flat share or like that?
Yeah, there's nothing easy about it. And yeah, I have to echo what Will was saying. I lived actually, close to Angel in the last 3 years, which was great because that was the area I wanted to move in. But actually, if I think back, just going back, 9+ years ago, I think for anyone who is considering or is about to, and you're looking at roles, and you have to be kind of very practical about it, is what does it cost? What does it cost in what area? How much does the commute kind of add to both time and money? And what can I realistically afford? So I think the area might not be the biggest consideration. Your budget is more than anything. And I think it depends a lot who you are, like similar to Victoria, you know, I was still very young, just like kind of had the student dorm experience. So if you have the Swedish corridor experience, you might be fine moving into like a shared house or apartment and have a bunch of, you know, different people. It's just actually it could be a very positive experience in London, meaning you'll meet people from all over the world. Some of them will probably still kind of stay your friends, best friends for a long time. And that's great about it. But you may not want to live like a student, you know, forever. If you're a bit older or just like your privacy a bit more and want to live on your own, that's very difficult. So it does not even matter. You might want to, you know, move completely out and it would still be a challenge because things have changed quite a lot. Housing has become even more expensive, especially after the pandemic, as we kind of moved back, and there's so much more demand, and you know, just the cost of living has increased all over, right? So the consideration is always about where you think you will spend most of the time. That's how I would go about that decision. So whether it be the office, but again, you have to think about it. Many organizations accept and kind of go through a hybrid working model these days, right? Like my organization did, and actually in my previous role, I kind of barely spent time in the office. It was very much up to me. So the location was not so important, but I was still in London. I would, you know, still travel. I would make it a special day if I went to the office, you know, that was not the default, therefore it was special. So that can give you more options. If you don't have to commute every day, you may bear a longer commute to live somewhere nicer. That might most likely mean farther out, maybe a train, maybe a suburb, whatever, just to get a bigger place or just, you know, something nicer. So I think budget for that, but budget your time. Your time is also very important. So where would you like to spend your time kind of after work and in your free time? You don't want to be spending your time commuting, but also not kind of all your money doing that. I think that's really important. I personally really like North London. So yeah, areas around like Angel, Islington, around Regent's Park, that's really great. But then there's plenty of nice, you know, nice areas in West London, South London, where Victoria mentioned, very nice pockets, right? Many people will choose to kind of live close to their office or relatively close. But I think again, it's important kind of, what do you want? The other thing to consider, I think, is, you know, maybe initially you want to stay somewhere closer just to have, if it's like London is new to you, you may want to experience things a certain way. So go out more, go to places more, and just to get that experience, that feel. And then later on, you know, you can kind of, once you know the areas, you know what you like, you don't have to be set on, I'm going to live there, whether I like it or not, whether it's good or not, can I afford it or not? So kind of take this gradual approach and find something that's suitable from a budget perspective, from a logistics perspective, and then kind of take it from there.
Yeah. I'm a little curious about your workplaces. Share as much or as little as you want, but I mean, London is known for quite diverse population, and I'm a bit curious on, when in your workplace, your colleagues, are they mostly from the UK, or is it from many different countries? And also, like, what does a typical work day look like for you? For example, Victoria, what Swedish founded company, what does the workforce look like for you, your colleagues in London?
Yeah, so I'd say right now maybe this is a little bit special now, just because like it is a Swedish company. So if we look at like all the employees, majority are Swedish, but not in the London office. That would be in the Swedish office. So in the London office, we're majority English. And this, I'd say, but we're not that big of an office here, so maybe the sample size isn't the best to compare with. But I worked in much bigger organizations in London, and it's been very, very mixed, I'd say. A lot of Europeans, people from all over the world. So that's been, I'd say, amazing, because you get to know people from all over the world. So it's been very mixed, but I can definitely sense, and like I know a lot of people who are saying the same, that it is starting now post-Brexit. It is starting to be a little bit more like majority English people. Obviously, it depends on the company, the culture. Bigger organizations will always have a very international workforce, but yeah, I think I get the feeling that it is a little bit more English now than like 9 years ago when I moved to London. So yes, sorry, what was it was an additional question to that, Maria.
Oh, it was actually a totally different question, I realized. But like, what your work day look like? How do you?
Oh, the work day, right? So yeah, how does the work day look? So we also have a hybrid setup. So we have the option to always go into the office, and I'm more of an office person, so I like going into the office. So I'd say you get in around 9 o'clock. It's not too early. I'd say in London, in all my different organizations, it's always been that you clock in around 8:39, which for me is almost a little bit late, like because I worked in Sweden as well, and in Sweden it's very common to start work at 8 or even earlier sometimes. So yeah, people get in around 9 o'clock, and then you take your meetings. I'm in meetings throughout the day, I'd almost say. You have lunch, and a lot of people actually take the lunch by the desk, which is something that, this is like the cliche that London is known for, but unfortunately it is often the case as well, but not always. Like, people do go out for lunch as well, so it's not at all like mandatory that one has to sit by your desk and eat lunch. And then yeah, the afternoon goes by. Again, I have lots of meetings. I'm in a lot of different kind of calls with customers, with employees, etc. I manage a team, so I'm in meetings throughout, and then you finish the day at around 7, I'd say, like around 7 o'clock. You're done, but obviously it depends on some days you work more. You don't really work that much less, like maybe around 6 o'clock, but I would not like leave the office before 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So
Pretty long. Well, like pretty much like it is here. Yeah.
Yeah, more or less, since it's a little bit later, right? And then but I think it depends on, and I would like to say, like, depending on the industry, like obviously a lot of people who go into finance and investment banking, which London is obviously very famous for, the hours can look very, very differently. So I think one needs to be open to work pretty long hours, especially if you're going to go into finance.
Yeah. And will you, in your new job, what does your colleagues, where do they come from, and how does your workday pan out generally?
Yeah, so this company is incredibly diverse and has won the Times Best Big Company to Work For, and also wins diversity prizes regularly. So it's I kind of feel that it was harder to get a job in Sweden as a British person before I'd gone to Lund than it is to get a job. I mean, obviously it's hard for me to say that, but yeah, I found that working in Sweden, quite often the requirements have gone to Lund or Uppsala, whereas I think because education is not free here, if you've got a master's degree, you're kind of more highly prized in the UK as compared to Sweden, because obviously a lot less people have masters here because of the cost. So I think it's a very diverse city to work, and when you walk around, so I work right near Liverpool Street in the city of London, and there's you often hear different languages, and so I think it's definitely a very diverse place to work. And in terms of my day, so I take the train at 7 or 7:30 from here, and get into work around 9. Then regular meetings with most of the business, to be honest, because I'm developing a new product, so it's across the whole business that I'm working with. Meetings with the senior leadership team on what's going on and the progress, and then I am quite fortunate really in that I finish at 5 to take the train, and then might do another half an hour or something of work, and then get back home here at 7 p.m. So I think, as Victoria says, very much depending which sector you work with is your working hours. But yeah, I think again it's come down to trying to attract and retain talent. They can't bleed you dry, really. It's kind of a give and a take thing.
Yeah. Right. And Sveta, we were talking about some of the challenges maybe of working in London. But do you have any like the pleasant surprises about working and living there that you maybe didn't expect when you moved over?
Had no expectations. I don't even know what I was thinking when I moved to London, other than, I'm very determined to get this role in, in a higher education institution and kind of build a career there. I think that sort of confidence of you being very determined and knowing what you want really gives you the energy and the perseverance to just go for whatever it is that, you're pursuing. And that was a different time a decade ago. I think because I've moved so much and there've been all the different kind of roles and organizations, there's just always been one thing that I always found really good in most places has been the people, the immediate team I worked with. I've had great managers, I have not so great managers, but it's been kind of a mix. But you kind of take that with you. And then first time I changed roles, I remember that being kind of one of those things you dread because you don't know who you'll end up working with afterwards, because you like the people you work with, and that's really important. I think the biggest realization is just how important people are, because you do spend more time with them, or at least you did back in the day when we were actually physically in an office for 7-8 hours a day. So you do value that very much, that connection, and kind of having that support with your team and kind of wider colleagues from the broader organizations. And even from outside, once you start to kind of go to associations, professional networking, you'll meet people from all over. And I found that consistently throughout in every organization, the people have been mostly really good and just very good to work with, not just nice on the surface, but just good people who want to kind of do their best where they are. Very kind of good, very professional, excellent at what they do so people can learn from, but also just have a genuine friendship, or just take that relationship professionally even into your next role. So I think that's really important. If you're interviewing or you go see a place, you like the people, that's a really good sign that you will kind of fit in, and you will forget fit in, but that you will make it work for you, and you will enjoy your experience there however long it is. And then the good thing about it is you might leave an organization, but you don't leave, the people, they stay part of your network, right? Like those are the people you really connected with and have a good working relationship with. You will stay connected with them and stay friends, and might find the benefits of that network throughout. It does not matter what organization you end up being. And I was definitely very surprised with, how I got my role at Clifford Chance, of how it came about, because I knew all of this, but I kind of never benefited from it until it happened to me, that I heard of a role from an alumni, that I got referred, and actually this whole thing worked out for me in that sense. So it really confirmed something I knew was happening, but in a sort of with a personal example as well. And then I think something that many people may not appreciate is just how long it takes to get a role. So I think since I moved to London, I had literally always been in job search mode, because my first role was like a 1-year contract, meaning you start, but you're aware that in a few months you have to start looking again, or at least knowing what's out there. And then the next role, same. And then I ended up being permanent. But I'd never not had a job alert, or many job alerts. So I think being aware of the time that you need, and also how long it takes to actually go through, apply, and find a job. For example, it really could be very different depending on your sector. When I was going for university jobs, it was infuriating just how long it would take, because you'd have to fill an application every time. It's like many, many hours, and they're all different. Even if you copy paste, it's just incredibly time consuming. So it's like, how much do I want this job? It's a heavy burden to just apply. You're not considered, you're not interviewing yet. You're not preparing for that, just to apply and to kind of be selected from a big pile. So I think just measuring your expectations with like the time commitment and actually getting a result. And I found that to be very different once I started in the private sector, and how I found my job at EY, for example, where I saw an ad on LinkedIn, I applied. It was a much more straightforward process. Upload your CV, picks up some details, you fill it up, and then, you're kind of, if you're suitable, you'll get the interview. Yeah, sure, go ahead, prepare for it. Spend time acing the interview, but not like hours. I probably spent weeks of my life just doing job applications for universities beforehand. So at some point I reached the point where I said, no, never again. I don't have the time. I don't care if the job is really good and interesting. It's just not worth the kind of initial hassle. And that might be the case in other sectors as well. I think what you may find surprising is the more interesting and kind of exciting the work, the less it might be paid. So, be aware that a public sector role will pay less, the university role, arts, culture, that will pay a lot less, and you'll have less. Actually, in public sector, university, you have good job security, but not so much in terms of how well you're paid. And in a city like London, that's important, I think you use it as your first kind of experience to get the experience, get on the job ladder, as it will, but then kind of continue somewhere else. It's a different story in the private sector, but again, it really depends what you do. So I think depending on the organization and your role and kind of seniority, you'll find really stark contrast. And one example I'll give is the professional services firms, where you'll have, people like the partners and very senior people in the organization just, earn in the scores of millions compared to, kind of a graduate starting in a role that will make a graduate salary that's, I don't know, 20 grand or something like that. And then kind of how do you build from that? And most of the time it's very incremental. So you're kind of, your salary is very incrementally growing even as you progress in your career. So it's not going to be a big jump until you're either quite experienced or you get a really good kind of opportunity to go and get a big salary kind of increase. So just being aware of that, I think, is also really important.
Sounds like hard work to find work. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really interesting. I think now I'm gonna ask you to, and it's allowed to generalize a bit. We're gonna move over more to like the culture of living in London and the UK. And for you, well, it would be interesting to hear like the cultural differences and the like etiquette things that might be good to know when moving from, well, things you experienced in Sweden and that might be different from living in the UK. And as I said, it's very okay to generalize, like in Sweden, you take off your shoes when you visit someone, those things. So let's start with you, Will. What would you say, like, when it comes to etiquette, like living in the UK, visiting friends and new acquaintances, what is important to think of as a expat or a newbie?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, culturally, Swedes and Brits are quite similar, but then I think what I found in Sweden is that it's kind of harder to make friends and to be accepted into a group compared to England. But then when you're in, it's very close and nice. I mean, obviously, I didn't find that at university because everyone's in the same situation. And yeah, we also take off our shoes. But I think one thing that strikes a lot of people is the politeness and the kind of very indirect way that Brits speak. And, there's a kind of, there's obviously a language, but then there's a very indirect and subtle way of talking that you kind of have to pick up on and use. Otherwise, people can think you're rude. And I'm struggling now to think of an example, but hopefully Sveta and Victoria will maybe have experienced or understand what I'm trying to say here. And culturally, I think, yeah, we are similar with the after work, but I think definitely Britain relies a lot more on going to the pub for socials, which I think is nice. But, every day going out for drinks, I'd rather do something outdoorsy and, interesting like you do in Sweden. I mean, obviously you still go for drinks and everything after work. I did regularly in Stockholm, but I think very much London is very drinking centric. And I'll have a think, but that's all I can think for now, actually.
Yeah, thank you. And Victoria, what are your experiences from cultural differences and etiquette advice for someone moving to London?
Yeah, I was trying to think here as well. I would have to agree with everything what Will said. Definitely, I think it's easier to get an invite to, you know, any kind of social event, I think, in London, because it's much more kind of like, oh wow, like if you meet a friend of a friend and they're like, oh yeah, please, like join us, like you're very much welcome. So I think it's a lot easier to meet new people for sure in London, definitely, than in Sweden, which is a little bit more, you stay close to your tight few friends. So definitely that. What else? I'd say this was definitely more so when I moved, not so much now post COVID, but it was the like when you meet someone, you would how do you say that? Like you would kiss on the cheek, like you would in many other European countries, which I think for a Swede, that's very uncommon. I don't think anyone would do that in Sweden. In Sweden, it's instead the hug that you would do with friends, right? But in London, I remember in the beginning, I was shocked that, you know, when you would meet someone new, you would do like the cheek kisses, and it's always like if it's one or two, it's mostly one, but then sometimes it's two. So that sometimes you know, can be a bit confusing, but definitely also like the politeness. You talk about the weather, but we do that in Sweden as well, so that shouldn't be too shocking. But then I think also a little bit when it comes to maybe social gatherings and so on, it's not so like in Sweden, I know, and maybe I didn't mention this before to everyone, I am Swedish myself, so that's why I also know the culture, but it's very much so everyone splits equally always. Like when you go out and you buy things, you do swish, and you know, everyone always splits equally. It's not so much the same thing in London. It's more so like maybe someone pays more sometimes, and then, you know, you take the bill, and then your friend takes it next time, or just something. So yeah, I'd say those are some differences I could say. But
And what cheek do you... Sorry.
Oh, the cheek. You start with your right cheek.
Okay.
I would start with my right cheek. I don't know, Will, since you're English, you'll have to say if that's the correct one. But
yeah, that's the correct one.
That's the correct one. Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna check if we have any. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, we've had a few come in. I might try and clump some together to kind of somewhere have some similarities, but because there are quite a few, I think, watching tonight that may be part of the EU, maybe from outside the EU, but are curious about, okay, post-Brexit, how is it really, how easy or how difficult is it finding jobs in London? And then more specifically, maybe for those that are coming on work permits, if any of you have any experience of how difficult it may be finding a company that's willing to sponsor work visas. I think most of you are anyways from the EU, so maybe don't have so much specific experience with that. But if you do, feel free to share. So I don't know which of you maybe would like to start with that. Sveta, if you have any inputs, maybe.
Not sure I can say much about it because I don't really know. I certainly, when I came, actually it's such a great time, the way I think about 2014 pre-Brexit, no one was even talking about no one knew how great those times were. What a great time was to come to London. But yeah, you know, I actually was it 2019? 2019, I got my settled status and then eventually a British passport. So none of those things really apply to me or kind of concern me. I think most people that are already here are, you know, kind of settled or have a way to stay here. My understanding is that, you know, if anything, while you can just come as a EU citizen and just, you know, find a job, settle, do whatnot, generally the rules are easier for kind of what they call the third countries, so outside of EU, outside of UK, which would mean, you know, you wouldn't be, certainly as an EU citizen, you wouldn't be kind of benefiting in any special way, but you shouldn't have kind of less of a chance because if the company would sponsor, you know, a foreign kind of person to come and work for them, it shouldn't really make a difference who they are or where they're from. But I'm not really close to it, so I can't tell. That's just my general understanding.
We understand none of you can give actual migration advice.
We,
So
we are
please,
not
everyone
lawyers
take
for
this with a
this.
grain of salt, but more of just word of mouth experiences is what we were after. Yeah. Victoria, did you have something to add?
Yes, I can just also add, I mean, similar to Sveta, I came at a time we didn't need a work visa back then. Unfortunately, that's the case now for people coming into London. I've heard different stories from, I have some people, I know some people who have applied and it's definitely possible. You do need the employer to be sponsoring you to get the visa. I've heard stories where the visa process can take a year. I've heard it can take it can go a lot quicker, so that's obviously something to consider. But I would think, and just like when being, or one must be, I guess, a bit strategic when applying for jobs, that go for bigger companies because they would most likely have established processes now for the visa applications. And because for smaller companies, I know for the company I'm working for now, we don't have like the new process in place for what it takes to sponsor someone to get the work visa. And then obviously that's even more costly for the company. So if I would apply for a job in London today, look for bigger companies who would have these processes in place, so they would be able to, you know, sort this out much easier, I think. And that's the only advice I can give around this, because I haven't experienced it either. But
Good advice. And do any of you have suggestions maybe of websites that you've used or know are popular when searching for a job, but also when searching for accommodation? I don't know, maybe, well, if you have any maybe UK expertise on accommodation websites.
Yeah, so Rightmove is a good one. I think it's rightmove.co.uk. There's also Zoopla, and so they've got a variety of different filters that you can put on there, from you know, looking for a room or looking for a house, or what sort of budget and what sort of area. So that those two are quite useful. And in terms of jobs, I think I mean, I used to work for the public sector, so the .gov. I think it's civilservicejobs.gov.uk, something like that, for the public sector. And then private, I'd recommend LinkedIn, or there's quite a few recruiters here. I think Indeed might be one of them, Reed as well. And I think very much it depends on which sector, because I think obviously people listening to this that would have degrees and masters, I think, you know, there's quite a big, I think in Sweden most people have a degree, whereas here it's less, so it kind of puts you in a more skilled bracket. So yeah, I think that would be two recommendations I'd give on those.
Anyone else have any?
Yeah, I'd echo that on the what Will was saying about the different sectors and kind of different places. So I know roles in academia we're usually like either advertised on The Guardian, jobs.ac.uk. Those would be the usual places. I troll, you know, kind of the individual universities' websites and finding roles and get alerts. That's the kind of the usual place to go. But if you're broadly looking at the kind of private sector, you're most likely to find any role on LinkedIn. And so that's like the obvious place to look. And it gives you a lot more kind of understanding. And then you can kind of target the company that you want and are interested in. And what's really great now compared to even maybe 5 years ago is just how much more is visible and available on LinkedIn. So it's not, you know, you can connect with someone and see who could be in your immediate team and try and get a sense that, do you actually like this place? Do you like the vibe? To use that term of what you're getting even from their kind of public sort of facing communications, but also the people, because you can't really get a sense of who's publishing and who's active, who's a social media kind of influencer, and actually reach out to some of those people if you if it resonates with you, or maybe it kind of puts you off. I think it works both ways, and it's a really good tool to use. And go and look the page, the LinkedIn page of all the big organizations would have one, and you'll see a lot of the kind of media they put out, the videos, and not just kind of the employer branding, aren't we a great place to work, but actually just their feed, watch a couple weeks worth of a feed and see who do they feature. Is it diverse? Is it interesting? Does it kind of align with what you want to do? I think those are kind of really good tips as well.
Yeah, we have time for a couple more
Yes,
questions,
sure.
right? Yeah. Because there's one other one that I was thinking here of combining a couple questions, but Will, you mentioned about maybe not a lot of Brits go on for getting a master's degree. So those of you who have masters, maybe looks more appealing on the job market. Would you, and this maybe goes for all of you, but would you all say that maybe that has opened the doors to potentially better paying jobs, or is it kind of the same? Is it worth taking a junior or trainee position, even if you have a few years experience, or is it really best to kind of try and reach for those top or more experienced positions because you're coming with a higher degree or a few years of experience as well? Or is it best to just get your foot in the door and get into those trainee positions and then work your way up? What would you say is the most common trend amongst what you've noticed within London companies? Anyone want to start?
Yeah, I've actually seen the opposite of what you would expect, which is I think most people who are international coming to London, unless they come on a specific kind of training scheme or internship scheme, most people have a master's degree. It could be from a third country, their home country, whatever it is. So many of us tend to be already over kind of qualified for the roles that we may or will kind of have most chances to get initially, especially if you're just recent graduate. So for example, when I moved, I had a few years experience and a master's, but when you looked on paper, it was just very hard to make that case. And I know they would have been, and it also would depend on the sector. For example, in the US where I worked before, having a master's would have counted as a 2 years experience on my CV. In London, that would not be the case. It's almost like I was punished for having spent a few extra years kind of getting my education and doing all these other fun things while I was not getting a job. Because actually compared to your average UK graduate, someone who went to university in the UK and had some internships in between their, kind of studies between the years and then got a job, there were times when I was earning a lot less while I was more educated, had a lot more, all sorts of experience, not necessarily work experience, but your average UK graduate would just have more, and that's what would count the most. And also, they get an in with that particular employer, and then it's much easier for them to continue and grow in that organization. But I think the key is in the moving of roles. And then I also have an anecdote, and this is from a friend of mine who actually did similar, like have a master's and have the experience in a different country. And she did take a role in kind of a big company here on a sort of a trainee program, or like very junior program. And long term, she ended up regretting that because she was well over prepared for that and had a lot more experience and found it really hard to progress, at the pace that would have kind of made sense for her. And then got stuck in these very junior projects that was hard to get out of. So if you have less experience, it's great. Just get your foot on the door, but don't get stuck in something that you can't leave when you can offer more. So I think it really, really depends. And then once you're in, it's really important to just move. Really, you've kind of done your learning. Then it's time to move on to the next place. And the movement, although hard, it will be the one that will add the most. I think so. Those are my key reflections now.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add a couple words or?
Yeah, I can just echo what Sveta just said. I would also definitely recommend get your foot in the door. I don't want to say take any job that you can get, definitely not. But yeah, just try to, apply for jobs that you find interesting and try to get in. and then move from there, because the job market is like, it's a lot more fast paced in London. Like there's so many opportunities, there's so much happening, so you can easily move around, and you can do so after like a year even, and that's not something to be considered strange at all. Where I know obviously in Sweden that would be considered maybe a little bit more strange to not be staying in a job for longer. So I'd say try to get your foot in the door and then move around, just like Sveta said. Obviously now one has to consider the visas with that specific company and the role that you're in, but yeah, just try to get in, basically.
But it's not impossible, so that's what we're hoping for.
I think we're running out of time. Let's do like the $1 million
Last
question or $1 million advice. Just a few quick words to anyone, any alum or student who is dreaming of a career in London. What would you say to them? Let's start with you, Will.
I think as we mentioned quite near the start, maximizing your network I think is really key, and that can be reaching out to people on LinkedIn or coming along to the Lund alumni events. And yeah, and I completely agree with what Sveta and Victoria just said on just getting the foot in the door and then moving around from there. Because I think, I again, totally agree that being overqualified is quite a concern for many companies. But I think then once you're in and they know that you're good, they'll be impressed that you've got good qualifications, and then you can move up quite quickly. So I think that's my advice, is getting the foot in the door, which is hard for a couple of years, but then quite quickly you really, shoot up.
Yeah, thank you. Sveta, do you have any top advice?
Yes, I would say, just thinking back as how I went about it, I think have a very clear idea of what you want to do and where you want to be, and kind of the long-term vision. So if you have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, I think that's really good. So you have that kind of long-term vision, and in the immediate, don't be put off by everything we've said today. Yes, it might be tough to find a place to live, and yes, it might be, tough initially to find a role, but none of those. If you're really determined and this is something you want to do and experience, not just as a job, but as a kind of life experience, the travel, all of that, just, go for it, put it in the time, expect that it won't be necessarily kind of, walk in the park, but it's definitely worth it. So go for that. And don't be disheartened if, your first role is not your dream job and they're not paying you all that great, but, focus on what you'll learn there, the people that you will meet, and how overall that'd be a great kind of growing, developing experience for you. And then, you can make up your mind later if you want to stay in London, move somewhere else, move within the company, different company. That first kind of step is really important, and you not losing track of kind of what you set for yourself to be your long-term vision. And also, when the time comes, don't be afraid to, change your mind and change direction and kind of change course, because that's also really important. There's no kind of need to, come and spend all your time trying to achieve something that, if your priorities change, the market changes, or you just want to do something else, you can do that here, and it's okay. So give yourself permission to do that when the time comes.
Great advice. Thank you. Victoria, final words to our
Yes.
audience.
I know that we ran out of time, so I'll be quick, but echoing what Will and Sveta said, it might not be super easy to get in, but like, if this is your dream, you will achieve it. Go for it, put in the work, and you will definitely come to London. It's an amazing experience. I can definitely recommend it. So yeah. Finishing off with those words, unfortunately, I will need to leave now, but thank you so much, everyone. It's been great talking to everyone. Great questions, great panel. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. We'll just add to that. Thank you so much for a lovely panel. Great talking to you guys, and I hope to stay in touch and meet you in London soon. And thank you to everyone who's been listening. You will receive the recording in a few days' time. So with that, we say a good night.
I hope everybody got lots of great inspiration. Maybe London was your dream and it still is, or maybe you've got some other insight that can rethink some things. So
a foot in the door and a clear vision. That's how you get successful in London.
Best of luck in
Best
research.
Yeah, and have a great night. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good luck.